Right, let's get more now on the increasing number of migrants who have been rescued off the coast of Dover in the past month. Let's bring in the former Director General of the UK Border Force, Tony Smith. Thanks for joining us, Mr. Smith. I mean, how concerned are you by the numbers starting to come across in the past couple of weeks?
Well, very concerned, Mark, because I haven't seen this volume of incidents in just such a short period of time. I think that's 12 now in the last 3 weeks of small boats coming across the channel. And I think today's figures take us over 100 now. So this is a very rare form of illegal entry into the UK for us. And it's worrying that it's still ongoing and we haven't been able to put a stop to it yet.
Why do you think it is happening now, particularly?
Well, we have, of course, invested in Calais. The traditional routes for illegal immigration into the UK have been in the backs of lorries through Calais. There has been a lot of work, I know, going on between the UK Border Force and the French ports to stop that type of irregular migration. But, of course, the smugglers aren't going to give up, Mark. They're going to try other routes. And I think what we're seeing now is a displacement into small vessels. But, you know, by doing this is exceptionally dangerous. And I really worry that someone's going to perish on those seas. We've seen what's happened in the Mediterranean. These are very busy shipping lanes. The Border Force are out there with the Coast Guard trying to rescue people. But I really am hopeful that we will be able to put this gang out of business quickly before something desperate happens.
Yeah, I mean, look, it is dangerous. I mean, does the Border Force have enough vessels? I mean, I'm told there's a couple of cutter vessels patrolling about 11,000 miles of coastline. Is that right?
Yeah, the cutter fleet's been fairly constant over time because we haven't had this sort of concerted attempt to breach us through the maritime routes. We have invested in coastal patrol vessels, so there are a number of those out at the moment. But we don't have a border patrol, Mark, like they have in the US. It's all done by the Border Force. So what happens when we get a crisis is that the resources we have are all deployed towards the crisis, and that can leave gaps in other areas. So I know now the Border Force will be bringing people in from immigration enforcement and from other areas to process these particular migrants, and of course working with international agencies. The National Crime Agency will be coordinated. So it's an awful lot of work going on and a lot of direction in trying to disrupt this gang. But it's really important, as I say, that we do disrupt them and stop this before something really bad happens.
Right. I mean, you're talking there about a gang. I mean, these are people presumably. I mean, the French police say they're being told that get across now, however you can, with us, because things are going to tighten up once Britain leaves the EU. I mean, it's very difficult to talk about anything at the moment without Brexit, but what impact do you think that is having?
I don't think this is Brexit related, Mark, frankly. I think this is because, as I say, it's displacement, because we have done such a good job in places like Calais and in other ports. And there's been a couple of reports by the independent chief inspector over the last year talking about the East Coast and the South Coast and saying that we do need to be careful of other methods because we have blocked off some routes. But then, of course, the smugglers will try other routes. So this is a very lucrative business for them. And the supply chain seems to be Iranians. It seems to be pretty well all of the boat people are Iranians, obviously in France. I don't know what their status is in France, but once they're on the high seas and rescued and brought ashore in the UK, there's a very good chance that they won't be returned to France. That fuels the supply chain, you see, and that also encourages the smugglers, and so it's a never-ending circle, and that's why it's really important we give full support to the Border Force and National Crime Agency, and of course, the authorities in France, that we work collaboratively with them to put this gang out of business as soon as we can.
Well, I mean, I was going to ask you about that. I mean, do you think there's a sense in which the French will probably or possibly not be trying to stop this in the way that they were because of, tensions in Europe and Brexit? Do you think that's an element of this or not?
I hope not, Mark, because we try to stay out of politics on the operational side. I was an operational leader and I worked very, very closely with my counterparts in France. We have a good operational relationship because we have a common purpose. And the common purpose is to stop smuggling. And human smuggling is an evil trade. And we both wanted to do that. I don't see how that really changes, whether we're in the European Union or not. I mean, we work with other countries too. There is a risk, of course, that we may lose access to systems, and that's been well reported, and data. But I do hope that intelligence by operational agencies against smugglers will continue to operate, both within the EU and outside of it. And I know there is a very real will and desire for the border force and the French authorities to continue to do that, regardless of Brexit.
Right. I mean, it's very difficult when you're an island to stop this kind of thing. I mean, there's lots of places people can come in. What do you think can be done now if this carries on?
We need to stop the boats, Mark. We need to stop the problem at source, and that means working with the French police. Now, I have seen some reports that the French police are finding more thefts of small dinghies and vessels along the coastline there. It's really important that our joint intelligence teams work with the French authorities to get to the root cause and of the supply chain and to take them out of business, because once those small boats are on those very, very busy shipping lanes, then we are in serious danger of having a critical incident or a crisis. And we've seen this on the Mediterranean. So what we have got going for us is I do know that the UK Border Force and the associated agencies, the National Crime Agency and the French agencies, do work in collaboration on joint projects in order to stop this. And I wish them the very best of luck in doing so.
Yeah, and just finally, we mentioned it there, you touched on it, the nationality seems to be Iranian. And coming through France clearly. Do you have any explanation for why that may be?
I don't know why it would particularly be Iranians, but people might wonder why it is that, the illegal migrants aren't sent straight back, Mark, to France. And the answer to that is there is something called the Dublin Convention, which is supposed to deal with asylum shopping, to stop people moving around Europe claiming asylum in lots of different countries. But unfortunately, that has fallen into disrepute. It doesn't really work. There are a number of legal opportunities now for irregular migrants to stay, which is why really the strategy is to stop people moving in the first place. Once people are on the high seas, it properly becomes a search and rescue mission, but those performing the search and rescue mission will inevitably end up processing those cases. And I very much doubt very many of those people will actually end up going back to France. They'll probably be taken into the UK system here. I'll say the difficulty is that's a vicious circle. It just continues to fuel the supply chain.
All right, Tony Smith, thank you very much indeed for joining us this evening. Appreciate your time. Thank you. Now, let's return to